I talked to Roger Ellis a few years ago about some of the films, and then we talked about Day Labor as well too. And I think this is about maybe less than 3 years ago, for sure less than 3 years ago. And I was surprised that the movie hadn't come out yet. And to be honest with you, I thought at one point it was never going to come out because Roger was really adamant about it's going to come out eventually. It was going through the Cannes Film Festival, I think, at one point, if I remember correctly. So I thought that was going to gain some momentum, and then with that being put in the festival run there, that to me almost guaranteed there's going to be something coming out of it there, because it's not easy to be admitted to that festival to begin with here. So with the upcoming release of the film, which is coming out in May, I don't remember the exact date, but I've talked to Korn. So as of right now, the episode with him hasn't uploaded just yet, but I've talked to him a little bit about the film towards the end of our conversation. But I guess what I'm wondering with you now is because you wrote the film, I'm not sure how you have how has that been for you, about having to wait for such a lengthy period of time, knowing that the film is finished, that there has been some interest in that there. And I remember when I first spoke with Gary that he had, at the time the film was being edited, and he was told, I forgot by who, that the film looks really good and it should be coming out really soon. And that this was like a couple of years ago. But for waiting this whole time for it to be coming to release here, I'm not sure if you have any like sort of I'm wondering if you have any doubts about whether or not it was going to come out, or if you were hearing things along the way that it was going to come out, but it's just going to take a lot more time than we thought it was. So, and if that was the case here, I always wonder if for anyone who's a part of the project, is it even worth waiting that long to begin with here? Because we know the project's good, or I'm not sure how you feel about the project now, but I'm hoping you can elaborate here and where your stance at it now that we're getting closer to that release date for this coming film.
Yeah, well, I mean, Rob, great questions. I'm glad there's not a lot out there on me. This is the first interview actually that I have ever done for this industry and film industry. So I don't know if that's a congratulations to you, to me, to both of us, to Gary, whoever it is, but definitely first interview. So I want to say thank you, and all praises to Christ for that, and all blessings go to him for the opportunity to talk about this industry and talk with you. I'm just flattered to even be asked to. So when it comes to Day Labor, I will say that May 3rd, right. Thank goodness, May 3rd of this year. So it's coming out soon. And honestly, I saw a first cut with my wife probably last year. I saw a cut of the film. We watched it. I'm like, this is good. I'm like, this is great. Awesome. Gary is awesome. Kevin Gage is great. The great Louis Mandylor is in it. Right. One of my favorites, Amy Johnson, just a great friend of mine who is just an amazing actress who is very underrated, under people's radar. I feel like she doesn't get enough credit for what she does. Neither does Gary, for that matter. Doesn't get really much credit for what he does. If you've seen Purgatory Road, if you've seen Malignant, Daylight's End, the list goes on for just the films that he's in. So he doesn't get enough credit for just the kind of actor that he is and the amount of work that he puts into it, because he's an actor's actor. It's not just the guy who shows up, gets word 2 weeks in advance and is like, oh yeah, I got this, I'm going to do it. He puts time into it. And so it's hard to find people like that, just like hard to find people like Amy and Louis. And you have this great cast. I mean, Roberto Sanchez is amazing. Danny Arroyo, just a sweet human being, amazing as well. I mean, you have just a great cast. Justin Nesbitt, a good buddy of mine too, someone who I've had the pleasure and the privilege to talk with. He's a great casting director as well. He knows how to get people together. He also knows how to kind of connect the dots, as it were. So when it came to Day Labor, this was filmed at the end of 2020, still kind of during the pandemic, as it were. And, I wrote the thing, and gosh, I pitched the idea. Next thing you know, they like it. I pitched it without even having a written script.
So was it like a spec script or any sort of outline when you initially had pitched it, or was it just literally kind of almost like off the top of your head kind of thing?
there was an idea, like I had told my buddies about it, my buddy Sergio, and I was like, Sergio, get the dude, what? I got this idea, right? It's like Most Dangerous Game, but it's with day laborers, and it's picked up at a Home Depot. And after the Home Depot, it's this, maybe some white supremacists, maybe not, these people who had an interest, like, and then suddenly I started weaving it together enough to pitch it.
Right.
And then once I got the call that's like, hey, what do you got? I'm like, I got this, and this idea. What do you think? And they're like, oh, I really love day labor. I'm like, sick, cool. So I got with my buddy Brian Frank Visiglia, who directed Ride, who's also an amazing creative. Hopefully you ever have the chance to with Brian Frank Visiglia. He's like a brother to me. That guy is like family. Man, he's just so great. And we sat down and we went through it, and I'm like, look, I kind of want to go here. And he goes, check this. What happens if this and this happen? And I'm like, so you're saying it's kind of like a Mexican Rambo? And he's like, yeah, kind of like a Mexican Rambo. And I'm like, awesome. That's what I'm talking about. Let's get it.
And I see it for the movie, a Mexican Rambo.
That's what I'm saying, dude. Kevin Gage says it one time in the film. He goes, oh, we got a Mexican Rambo on our hands. I'm like, nice. Yes. But he would love the Rocky pinup you have behind you. Brian, my buddy Frankie would just love it. He's a huge Sly fan. He goes Sly to the fullest. And so when we were going through it, I'm like, yeah, Mexican Rambo. And my wife is Latina. And so the idea came from, I wanted a Mexican hero in the industry. I wanted that to be portrayed. And with everything going on at the time, politically, you had Trump wanting the wall. You had the highly against illegal immigration and a cut down on immigrants. And I was just like, man, let me take this idea, this concept, and kind of put it into what's going on now and how many people are coming across the border and how many people aren't ever found. Right. R.L.S. Frazier was amazing in that regard, where he's like, dude, here are the numbers. Like, there's this many people who come across the border, but then there's over this many bodies that are never found ever. Like, bodies not found, nothing. And I'm like, oh, so then the story is it's pretty current then, is what you're saying. It's a pretty current story. And he's like, yeah, but it was like during the time, like The Hunt came out and all these other Most Dangerous Game, the remake with Hemsworth came out. And we kind of lost our shot with Day Laborer even back then. It was like, hey, if you're going to release it now. If you're going to release it now. And then it just kind of fell to the wayside. And now, thank God, it's finally coming out so people can see these amazing actors and the amazing job that R.L.S. Frazier did directing it. I'm excited for people to see it. So
then I guess what I'm trying to understand too with this, because I remember I talked to Roger before about this, and I think around the time there was obviously the subject matter with like racial representation, among other things as well too, was definitely like at a super high point. And then I think this is before I knew what the how this all came to be for him. But when I had asked before if the idea of this film was it too controversial, was it too much of a taboo subject matter where, the way things were going, especially at that time, that probably not the best idea to take on this project because it might offend some people, might piss some people off, or whatever the case may be. He was like, actually, no, they were actually for it. So because time has passed, do you think that there's still relevance to the story? And what I mean by relevance, I'm talking about like more in the sense of that so much time has passed by that it's not in the forefront of like putting in people's faces, if you will. Like it's taken a step back to a degree, depending, I guess, who you ask. But now that's being released in this upcoming future here, do you feel like this is probably the best time to release it rather than releasing when it's in the thick of this whole political, I guess just chaos that was incurring at that point? So, do you feel like there's a major difference at that point? Like this is probably for the best rather than doing it at that time when the iron was still hot?
That's just a great observation. And you're right. It would have been great to release it then. Even just like I said, release it now. This is it. I actually think that right now is the perfect time to release it again. I think that if you're going to wait, you have the election coming up. Yeah. You once again have Trump, who's looking to get elected and sorry, that's my wife
No
I don't know
worries.
why she's calling me. She should be at work. Why isn't she teaching kids? Teach your kids. But I think right now with the political kind of atmosphere that's there, I mean, if people get upset, first, let me comment on that, because I really don't care if people get upset. It's an artistic form. It's creative. We have so many issues in this industry where people are so PC and everything needs to be a certain way. And the generation that I grew up in, I'm 33. And so the generation I grew up in with, my parents, everything was just like, hey, you can be what you want, do what you want. This is a land of the free. This is, hey, we have creative freedom. We have artistic freedom. We do it this way. And when people get so upset about certain things, like, look, just watch it and understand that it's not just against immigration. It's actually trying to put something behind it, that people think this way for a certain reason and people think this way for a certain reason.
Right.
But at the end of the day, no one should be, in this case, killed.
Right.
But no one should be hurt or discriminated against or anything just because of who they are, what they look like. And that's one of the biggest things here is, like, he is an American citizen. Our main character, Derek, in Day Labor, he is an American citizen. He's suffering under hard times. He's lost his job. He's trying to provide for his family. So he goes with his cousins and uncle stuff to go and be a day laborer just to make some extra money. I mean, when haven't you known this is a land of America where we're hustlers?
Right.
I mean, I've had 4 jobs at one time before where I'm grinding day in and day out. I was a painter for many years. I coached football at a high school level. I was a youth minister at the same time as I also was a bartender. And you got to make the money in order to survive, especially here in California.
Right.
So I think right now with the political atmosphere as it is, with Trump kind of coming back around and going for re-election, you're going to get some of those same conversations happening again, where it's like, well, is he going to cut off immigration? What's your thoughts on immigration now? What's your thoughts on this? So if anything, it might really help the film with those conversations happening again, especially here when they start, during the summer here leading up to the election.
Do you think though that there's a possible, because obviously you don't know how the people will perceive the film until obviously it comes out and whatnot, and it's a major hit and miss in some cases here. It's something you can have a good idea about what the turnout could be, but considering that so much time has passed and how, I wouldn't say things have changed again, because I think it's perspective for certain people, but I guess in like a major group, it's still consistent. But what I'm trying to get to here is that, do you think though that when the movie gets released and then you start to hear, let's say, a positive reaction to the movie, I guess my question to you really is more about what is really for you the main, what's the end game for you? Because you obviously had an idea about, I want to do a Mexican Rambo, but then when you're writing the movie, was there any concerns about at the time representation was a major thing? Well, we have to have more stories of this sort, but it should be written by people who are from that same background. But here we have a white guy writing about a Mexican, a Mexican American day laborer who's a veteran working with illegal immigrants, and he's basically thrown into a game where his life is at stake, but they don't know that he's a trained soldier. So there's a lot of complexities behind that, but you're telling it from a more or less, I guess, a Latino perspective, but you're a white guy. And I'm thinking to myself, there was ever hey, listen, that's a good idea, but can we just get a Spanish guy to write the story too? Because we don't want people to think that it's all by this white guy. I'm wondering if you had a little bit of that. And then when the film comes out, I'm wondering if something like that may pop in your head and be like, oh, well, people understand where is this coming, because even though I'm white, but I'm writing it for a Hispanic lead because I think it's a good story to tell. I'm just curious about what your perspective on that is. You're seeing how people may react to that, or do you think people have already moved on and figured out that, hey, listen, if it's a good story, that's all we care about?
That's a really good point. And, it did cross my mind, even Frankie, my buddy, he's Argentinian, he's from New Jersey. He's got this swagger about him. And he was just like, look, even talking to, R. Ellis Frazier, it was just like, they have to speak Spanish. They have to do this. We have to put some subtitles in. I'm not just going to have them speak English, right, if they are Spanish, mi otro idioma es español. So, yo hablo mucho, pero you know, people look at me as a gringo and think, oh man, he can't speak Spanish, he doesn't do this or that. But like, when I was a painter, all I did was learn Spanish and do stuff. So I thought it was crazy, but it did kind of come to me. You know, I guess I might have been blinded a little bit, Rob, just because my wife is Latina, and I was doing it for my kids, my future kids,
Right.
so that when they're going to be mixed, they're going to be of that. And if they wrote it, it would be fine because they're part Mexican, so they can write that story. But I was really trying to write it for them so that when they grew up, they could see a Mexican hero. There's just not very many Mexican heroes in cinema to this day. And even if there are, it's like, oh, you have this and that. And it's just like, yeah, he's a cholo from here or there. Cool. But he's a hero who rises up. Yeah. That speaks to one sect of what the culture is. But ultimately, you know, there are Mexican Americans who served in our United States military. Why can't there be a story about that? But yeah, I was a little thrown. I definitely felt like, hey, I'm a white dude. I can't really write this, but at the same time, I couldn't limit myself where it's like, well, then I can't write about African American. You know, I can't have African Americans in my scripts. I can't have, you know, Latinos or Latinas in my scripts. I can't have this or that. I can only write from a white perspective, but yet, and once again, this is where people will get either upset or applaud, is that I believe that film in general is the telling from a human perspective. And so the amounts of experience and everything you've had and what you've gone through in life, it's a human perspective. And while I may not know exactly what it's like to be a day laborer, go here and there, I know what it's like to grind and work my butt off in order to get my family right, to make sure I have enough money to live each and every day. I don't know what it's like to be deported. I don't know what it's like to do any of, I don't know what it's like in their shoes.
Right.
But what I will tell you is that I am never against, and whether I write it or not, I'm never against a certain set of people being lifted up in cinema and film, even if it is from a white dude like me. I'm never going to hate on anybody who writes something like, look, we don't want a white lead. We need this for this because that's what the story is. And if you're not willing to tell that story, then we need to figure out people who are willing to tell that story. So whether it is, I mean, I would love, and I always ask for more writers who are, you know, I mean, the film I did, Roberto Sanchez came up with a great idea for 72 Hours. He's an amazing writer. You know, he really loves his stories. He's a great actor. He does his thing. I mean, he kills it in day labor. Roberto Sanchez is amazing. Danny Arroyo is amazing. Like, you have such a great list of, and I can go on and on with just even Michael Pena and all these different people who are in the industry who are, you know, Latino or Latino, who are amazing actors, actresses, writers, directors. I mean, Alvarez, who did the Evil Dead remake, love it. Love it. I really call for more people to rise up and tell those stories, but I was definitely hesitant before writing it because I knew that I'm a white dude. I don't share the same experiences, but yet I knew that this story had to be told. And R. Ellis Frazier really helped me out with that. R. Ellis Frazier really came in and assisted.
Do you think though that if you were limited to what you could tell, like for example, let's say if they said we like the idea, but we definitely need more of an authentic flair to it, so we want to bring in another writer who does have more or less this background that you want to incorporate, that can add some more authenticity. If they had, let's say if they said that from the beginning before film started shooting, and they said, we love your idea, but we just want to add more of this, so we're going to bring someone else in. Would you have been opposed to that too? They said, you know, it's going to be a Latin writer, but you've never met this person, whether it be a guy or a girl, but you're going to work out some ideas, share them your ideas, and they're going to share your ideas and make a great script out of that. Because the reason I'm curious about that is because I do believe you with what you're telling me here, but I guess I'm more interested in kind of challenging that, because I've always wondered if when someone is coming from a perspective of telling a story that they don't have any real connection with, they have an understanding of it because you've gone through the same struggles that everyone else goes through as far as having to work to provide for their family, but certain angles of certain people's lives you may never know unless you're told, but even then you don't have that experience. So, but if someone says to you, you have to work with someone that does have that authenticity they can bring to the story, and that's the only way we're going to make the film. Like, how would you think you would have reacted to that if that was going to be the case from the very beginning?
Oh, I would have loved it. I
Really?
mean,
Okay.
yeah, I would. I'm not opposed. I love collaborating. I love
Okay.
collaborating with anybody. You can ask anybody. Like I collaborate with Gary all the time. My buddy Frankie. Like anybody who wants to write with me, I never say no to. And I think if it would have came to that for Day Labor, I wouldn't have been opposed to someone being like, "Look, this guy, hey, he's a Latino writer. This is his name. This is his stuff. We want to put him on just to give some authenticity to this level. What do you think?" I've been like, great. I can stop going to the translation bar and looking up different ways to say things. Awesome. It would have helped me out immensely.
That's funny. Okay, so well, I guess what's interesting for me now is that I because I'm hoping that you can also elaborate further with me because I haven't really revisited this subject matter in quite some time. Like I'm wondering how from your experience up to this point, how things have changed as far as the industry is concerned. Because like one of the major things that's come out lately with regards to like as of this recording, the Academy Awards was this past weekend. And I hadn't seen it, but I heard it was actually a good award show this time around, and a good one since in quite some time, from what I understood. But the point I'm getting at is that the Academy was very adamant about like these are the criteria you have to meet if you want your films to be nominated for whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the major changes that were made was the fact that you have to have a person of color, you have to have this and this and that. And me being a person of color, I remember thinking that's fair. I'm actually fine with that. But the problem that I had with it was that if that's the case, if we made The Godfather today, we would have never gotten that to be nominated or be highly regarded, whatever the case may be. I'm not saying that film deserves that, but what I'm trying to get is that like the recognition and the legacy of the film has, if those were instilled back in those days, what we have, the films we have that we all admire now because of the criteria that has to be met now. Now, I understand where they're coming from, but I've also talked to some people too. I'm not going to mention names here, of course, but that are very much for that, but they're really hesitant about the restrictions that are in place because if I have to do these things, then I have to meet these criteria. But the story I want to tell is actually is more this angle, or I'm getting a job because I'm a woman, but I don't want the job just because I am. I want the job because I'm good for the job. So it's almost like a handout in a lot of ways. Whereas before they had to work super hard, if not harder, in certain circumstances. But I'm wondering for yourself now, when you're seeing it in talking with people in the industry, do you notice a little difference now how things have changed? At least maybe whether it be the indie side or the major studio side. But have you noticed a difference? And if you have, what difference have you noticed now that's either for the best or is still taking some time for it to get to where it doesn't matter who you are as long as you're just good for the part?
Yeah, I mean that's the best thing about the industry in a way when it comes to just working hard and being right for the part. I mean, I can't tell you, even as an actor myself trying to do it, how many times it's like, oh, you just don't fit the role, you don't fit this, we haven't hit our diversity level yet. We haven't hit the amount that we need, so we can't have you. Your audition was great, but this doesn't really work for us. I'm like, cool, that's fine. I honestly think that the Academy did it for a reason, and it's for inclusivity, right, which is great. Be all inclusive of everybody. That should be. But like you said, kind of like I'm all for that. I'm all for setting some of these parameters. It only helps out bringing everybody together, and that's what film should do. It shouldn't push people away, but it should bring people together from all backgrounds and share people's different stories. The part that really worries me is like what you're saying, and it's not really a worry. It's more so like you said, The Godfather. If I had to do A, B, C, and D, would The Godfather still have been up for an Academy Award? Well, no.
Or would the film even be made for that matter too?
Well, that's true. You know what? Good point. So, well, yeah, would the film have even been made? But yet at that time, the story they're telling, there was really no room for inclusivity. It was really like the story that they're trying to tell. So I think the same thing goes. I mean, does the same thing be said for, I'm not going to go against any films, especially like any Jordan Peele's films, anything like that. Like I love those films. I love Get Out. I love Nope. I love Us. And that's just one example, but it's saying like those stories should be told. They should be told. Yeah. But is there always room for a white this or a white that? Not always. There isn't. Is in this there
no room for me, guys. No,
yeah, there shouldn't be, man. If this story doesn't have room for, hey, even if my wife's Latina, can I fit a Mexican male in here, or can I get an Argentinian male, or someone from Colombia or Cuba, or from somewhere in South America, anywhere, Brazilian? Let's do it. Let's get it. Yeah, the story doesn't really work with that. Oh, okay. All right. Fair enough. Let's go this route.
Well, think about this though, because this is because you've obviously been around Latinos for a good part of your life, I would think. But the thing is that here's a perspective that I've always gotten from people is that, like I remember I met someone a while back that were Argentinian, which I didn't know, but they have a European background, but they were born and raised in Argentina. And until I heard them speak, I realized, oh, you're not. I thought you were, Anglican or whatnot,
right?
And they're like, no, I was born and raised in Argentina, and but I've just got to this country, I don't know, 10 years ago, whatever it was. But looking at them, they looked very Anglo. They didn't have any like Hispanic traits, if you will. And I remember at the time thinking about this, and then I was watching. I think I was watching a movie. No, it was a TV show, if I remember. And I remember thinking that this person looks fitting for this part, because they just look Caucasian, and if it wasn't for the accent, they would have been great for the. Like I was imagining all these different scenarios where someone could be from somewhere and they don't look the part, but they actually are from that background, but they would probably be much more accepting, to be more accepted rather because of their skin tone. But then when you have, like, for example, people who are more, I guess, darker skin tone, like a more or less a typical Hispanic. There's obviously a limitation, that they would go through, because they want to make sure that you fit the criteria, but then the criteria that you're fitting are more or less the stereotypes, of which I've heard countless stories of that before. But now it's more opening to let him just be cast for the right part and for the right reasons, I believe as well too. But do you think though that in time that will change as well too, where the white Hispanics will also be included, where they're not going to be confused as, oh, you're just a white guy, but we want an Hispanic. I am Hispanic. No, but we want like a real Hispanic looking person. We know you're born and raised in Brazil or Argentina, but you look too white. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, do you think that will also change as well too in time from what you're seeing in your perspective, given the people that you were getting involved with this project here?
You know what, Rob, that's also a really good question. I would say my answer is, I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. Yeah. I think that when you really look at it, it's, let's say that I'm setting up this entire film that is based literally on, El Coyote, someone going across the border and helping people come across and do this or that. Cool. But yet I have a bunch of white people but are Hispanic, and they're coming across, and everybody's like, wait, why is he helping a bunch of white people? That doesn't make any sense. That can't. And you're just like, okay, well, I guess we do have to go darker and this, that, cool. If it was a bunch of like me coming across the border, which might be an interesting film, just to switch that up a little bit, like white people trying to get away from America, going into the Mexican border, going into Mexico, and them helping them across, let's get out of here, dog. It's getting crazy. But ultimately, I don't know if it's going to change. I think that people, and it's not due to the lack of trying or due to people not wanting it. I think it's just due to what the film industry is currently. It is saying that we need this certain look and we need this certain dark complexion. And I'm not even opposed to it, just because, I don't care if it cuts any rolls out for me, whatever. I think that other voices need to be heard, and other voices are being heard. I think that's what the industry is really going toward, is that we need other voices to be heard. I just don't think that cuts away though from even anybody who is Anglico or Anglican and who has, a white skin complexion. There's still other stories out there as well. And some people are just really good at telling stories. And there's some people who just aren't that good at telling stories. So to go on your points as well, I would not be opposed with working with anybody, but I don't think anybody should be opposed with someone helping them with the script, going, they're from this background, let's work together. Hey, you're from this, let's work together. Hey, you know what? We are going to go this route. for this film because you do speak the language. You do, like, you grew up like this. Let's bring you in because your experience alone is the best. I think that just brings up the problematic nature to some people of who's better for the role.
Right.
Who is the better actor? Who is the better, like, if you are the better actor and you are from Argentina, like if you're from there, you're Argentinian, then you should be able to play the role if you're the best actor for the job. But if someone else is a better actor and they've done the work and maybe they are of a darker skin complexion, then they should have the role. I think it should just come down to who is the better actor instead of being like, well, you don't really fit what I'm looking for. It's just like, no, who is the better actor? Who gave the better audition? Who had the better tape? Who does the director see being the character? And if that's who you see being the character and they fit this criteria, they fit everything except for maybe the skin complexion, where it's like, they're a little too light for me. Yeah, but they grew up. They grew up over here. They grew up there. They grew up in Brazil. They grew up in South Africa, and they know everything from there. But are they the better actor? No. Cool. Go with the other guy or girl. Go with them if they're not the best for the job. And I think that's what's kind of happened even in our country. Is I'm not against anybody. It's just I'm like, who's better for the job? Who has the most experience? Who has this or that? I'm not saying go get there was that film that, no offense to Emma Stone, who just won an Academy Award, but she played a person from Hawaii.
Yeah. Oh, you're talking about, it was one with Bradley Cooper too, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. I think so. I can't, I was almost want to look it up, but that should never happen.
Right.
that should never happen where we have a white person who's obviously white with no background in the area get a role. That's where my philosophy goes straight out the window, where it's like, it's Emma Stone. So we're going to cast her.
Well,
yeah, but she's supposed to be Hawaiian.
Well, I talked about this before in the past about like a big example I bring up is the fact with Ben Affleck, where he played Tony Mendez in Argo. And Tony Mendez is Hispanic, but he's half Mexican, half white, Mexican through his father, white through his mother. But so I bring the story up because like it was a controversy at that time where why is a white guy playing a Hispanic man, and the story was that Tony Mendez is like, listen, I grew up, I didn't grow up Hispanic, and when my father died, the community just like shut me out. And I've heard tons of stories like that where more or less like a half breed, if you will, were just pushed out because you're not one of us or whatever. So like this whole thing about like inclusivity or people being I'm all for that, but because I was actually want to get your perspective on it as well too, because I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but there's a question to this here. But the point is about Tony Mendez being pretty much saying, listen guys, it's okay because I don't consider myself Hispanic, so it doesn't bother me at all. So I mean, I'm not sure if he said get over, but I'm pretty sure he did imply that in some way. So but my question to you, I guess, was with leading to this here is because you're telling a story about wanting to share a hero story where you want to see a hero that we don't get to see very often. And that's a very admirable thing. But I also want to hear your perspective about like hearing the stories where you like the real stories about the internal arguments within the communities. Like I always had this thing about, I want to see a story about Hispanics that are just as mean as white people and just as racist as white people. Like, why don't we tell those stories? Like, well, no, it's going to put us in a bad light. I get that. But we've told so many stories of that sort, or we've seen many stories of that sort of white people being very, very rude and very, very violent, very, very racist. But Hispanic people are the same way as well, too. Like, so to kind of look the other way is just as bad, if not worse, I would say, because there's good and bad in every community, in my opinion. I've seen both sides of it. So I'm always curious to hear someone's perspective of a storyteller, where if someone presented you, hey, listen, we're going to write a story about this community, but they're also just as bad as the white people too. What's your take on that? Like, would you be willing to tell a story of that sort that's completely, it's going to be very taboo for obvious reasons, but there's a good story to tell because now you're getting a different perspective from some things that most people don't get to see or hear about, but very much exist. And I'm sure you're aware of it as well too. So I'm wondering, like, if you think if someone presents you an idea, we're going to tell the story because this is catching on and we like what you did with Day Labor. Can you do the flip side of that for this movie? You think you'd be willing to do that? And if so, would you be comfortable with it?
You know what, Rob? That's a really good. If there's a story, I'd have to talk to the person here out the story.
Right.
Ultimately, my respect for the culture, especially the Mexican culture, but Latino culture is. I have the utmost respect for that culture. I mean, I've seen. I lived outside of Ventura for a long time, right by Oxnard, where I saw the strawberry fields all the time, and people always wanted to complain about, oh, well, people taking our jobs, this or that. I'm like, you get out in the strawberry field. You tell me how your back doesn't hurt and how you feel doing that. I said, I know I couldn't last years, let alone probably a month doing that. So you go and do it. I do believe that there is corruption, evil, and within all people. But once again, that comes back to the form of the human experience and the human just condition. And even being a faith man, I know that evil's within all. So it just depends on the story to me. I think right now I would say no. I'm not going to do that story because I have too much respect for it. However, it just depends on the story, really, because if the story is this, and I believe in redemption. Right. I believe in redemption through. But say there is a redemption
involved with the story. Like it's a hard truth story, very, very authentic. But there's a redemption. The reason why we're telling the story, we want you to tell the story, is because it's the struggles of going through the highs and lows in life, being part of the community, and we love the way you tell these stories. We love the way that you write these stories down. But the reason why we're asked is because you've gone through redemption yourself. We want that for this story as well too, whether it be faith-based or whatever the case is. But it's got to be an authentic story, and we want your take on it. We want your sensibilities in telling the story. If that's involved with that, you think you'd do it despite some hesitation?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely would. And I would but for that project, especially after Day Labor now, I would definitely ask for a writing partner, somebody from the culture, somebody who speaks the language fluently. I speak it, but not fluently. But someone who has just been in that realm, someone who was part of the Mexican mafia, someone who maybe did serve time in prison, someone who, in Oxnard, who was part of the Colonia gang, in Oxnard, I would go out and interview people and have that conversation and see what it's like. But I would also want somebody with me to be like, all right, I'm going to show you how just mean and this and that we can be to people of our own culture. Because white people are mean to white people. The African-American people are mean to their own people. Like everybody seems to not have an issue being mean to each other when it's their own. And then when it's others, it's like, oh, well, you do have racist people. You do have people who don't care about others in this way. I think you adding the redemption story to that type of story, okay, this group of these adults and kids from not even from Mexico, but from Southern California, part of this gang, this and this happens. You see how vicious they are to each other in their own community. Yet there is this one bright and shining light, this person who might be falling down the path. It's almost like a coming of age story. And, they're like, oh, I don't know if I should. They get involved with bad things. They do this, they do that. And then suddenly come through it.
I think I was more looking at it in a sense of not necessarily about let's say, I'm not referring to drugs or hard life. It really is more about I think, because I've always been interested in seeing a story where it's like the everyday family, the traditional values, the traditional beliefs, the faiths that they carry as well too, among other things as well. But then there's also the do as I say, not as I do, or just do it because of this. There's a lot of there's so many, and the thing is that I'm not just talking about my community here, but I see that in various other communities too. There's obviously some differences when it comes to the language, the culture, among other things as well. But I still see that the problems are still exactly the same. So, but I think because I've seen so many stories about drugs and alcohol and this, and there's plenty of that in every culture. But I guess I'm more interested about the everyday kid or the everyday adult that sees that, and then they've got accustomed to that. And then now they're going through a redemption where they're stepping away from that. And once they've gotten away from that, they're like, holy shit, I don't need this anymore. But then when they go back, it's like they got right back into the habit again because they're so accustomed to that. and how do you break that cycle? Like that to me would be much more interesting, right? As opposed to like I went to jail. I'm like, we've seen that before.
Right.
We've seen that many times. Let's focus on the inner turmoil within the family where there is a drunk and maybe there is an alcohol, there is a drug addict there, but they're not the focus. It's this guy, but we're getting his perspective because there are people like that in those communities where this guy was an asshole. Well, why is he an asshole? Because he didn't want to hang out with us. Well, then you find out the real story. Like, oh, you just didn't want to hang out with them because they were just really bad juju, and you realize that this is not good for me. This is not good for my well-being. It's not good for my mental health or whatever it is. I just don't want to be around that negativity. And as soon as I got away from it, I felt so much better about myself, and I chose to stay away from them, not from my community, just from them. That's the complexity that I've always been interested in seeing. But because you wrote Day Laborer, you have one perspective, which is a really good perspective. But the flip side of that, the internal perspective, where they have they don't know what they want, but they have to figure out what they need, and then they realize what they needed is to get away from them. If that makes any sense.
Yeah,
so something like that would that pique your interest?
I mean, it would. I mean, there's so many different stories too, even within my own family now.
Right.
It's just like, you have a culture of people who came from Mexico and they came to be here in the States and they spoke fluent Spanish, but yet they wanted their kids to be more Americanized.
Right.
So then they didn't teach them Spanish.
Right.
And therefore, by not teaching them Spanish or teaching them about the culture, they end up becoming true Americans. Or my wife refers to them as coconuts, brown on the outside, white on the inside. But you suddenly have this group of people in the culture who get angry now because their sons, their daughters, they suddenly had kids and then they don't speak Spanish or know about the culture. And then they get angry when, like, even my wife marries a white dude who speaks more Spanish. Sadly, sorry, love, if you watch this, but speaks more Spanish than she does. She's still Latina in the right way. She still gets really upset if I. But then suddenly gets mad at them for marrying a white dude, and it feels like there's an animosity there. When I'm just like, look, I've never really been super, I always never figured I'd marry a white girl. I always kind of either, there was this, that, cool. My background story happened. If we ever get into it, cool. If I ever make a love story, we can get into that conversation. But I saw her. I'm like, oh yeah, I love you. I love the person who you are. I love this or that. And then suddenly it's like, yeah, but you're white. Yeah. It's kind of hard for us to do. Why do you go do white things? Why do you go do white people things? Or why do you do this or that? It's like, they're just things that people like to do. People like to wakeboard. People like to ski. But then you understand it because you go, that is from really a world of privilege.
Right.
And so I can understand that when they get super upset because it's like, we didn't have that privilege at being immigrants coming here. And yet you're flaunting almost these privileges in our face. And I think that's what the true issue it is. I don't think it's, I'd be egotistical and I would be way into myself, narcissistic, to say, oh, it's because of my skin. How dare they? Because of my skin. Right. I think it's just the difference of culture, the way that people grew up. Right. And I just don't think it should be pointed back to my wife, who is almost 100% Latina, I think with 5% Cherokee. So almost 100%. And it's like, look, it's not her fault. It's not her fault that this happened. And I understand where you're coming from. So when it comes to that story, I think that there should be more stories shared about the faith and not just Roman Catholic saying, oh yeah, all Mexicans are Roman Catholic. That's how it works. You're like, well, they probably believe in other things too. They probably have different, that would be an interesting story in itself. Yep. Somebody who goes away from the Catholic faith and suddenly gets almost denounced by his own community of people, but then finds a new community of this or that, but still tries to hold on to his family. That is an interesting story because it deals with kind of what you're saying, is that what we hold to be true in the culture, and then sometimes what the reality is of our world, right? And how they kind of conflict sometimes with conflicting different worldviews.
So, so when you're hearing yourself explain that, like there, see, you have I think you have because like if I was a producer, I would tell, and I'm listening to you, Tyler, then you should write that story. You should be the one writing the story because you have a unique perspective. Yeah, get someone to write with you, but you have a very unique perspective. But if you're not going to write your perspective as far as being the white guy in the family, but write the story about the guy that's in the culture, grew up in the culture, and make a great story out of that. And if you need a second pair of hands, bring them in, but make sure you tell the best story. Because like to me, that's something that I would be very interested in seeing, because there's so much of like of a trope, and I'm not against tropes. I mean, I'm an action guy. I love tropes. I love all the same tropes that I grew up with. I still love them to this day, and I never really get tired unless it's done horribly. But otherwise, I don't get tired of seeing them. But the tropes that I think I'm more accustomed to not wanting to see are the family drama tropes where my daughter was going through that. Like we've seen that before. Just, let's see how she was when she got when she came home from work, where she is pissed off or whatever, and then how she talks to her kids. Why is she doing that? Because mom did that. But why did mom do that? Like those are the finer details that I'm always interested in seeing, but from a cultural perspective, because I think everyone has this perception about, I'm not to say that, Latinos are terrible. Not, yes, there's great things about our culture, but there's a lot of bad things about it as well too, that I don't think gets talked about enough, because they don't want that to be painted in a negative light. And I understand why, but why can't we just tell those stories? And the way I see is that what better way to tell a story than have it from a white guy that knows the culture and can tell it from that perspective and be able to tell a really good story at the end of the day. Because if you look at, because this is the thing about like the way things are changing now, because if a person can tell a story, if they can tell a really good story at the end of the day, that's all that really matters to me, no matter what their religious backgrounds are, cultural background, sexual preference, whatever the case may be. If they can tell a really good story and they're good people, that's all that matters to me at the end of the day. But there's a lot of taboo subjects that people aren't willing to take just yet because it's too risky. And those are the ones that I think are worth the risk, in my opinion. But will it pay off? I have no idea. But we will never find out until someone takes that chance.
Well, and I play with that all the time, Rob. Like even the idea that I'm working with right now with with Kevin, who is in Malicious and just did Bastard Sons, which is great. We're working on a homeless vet idea, about an idea about homeless people, and I can't get too into it.
Right.
But the idea of, I want some of those stories to be told, the stories that we hear about, the stories that are this, the Fisher King back in the day with Robin Williams and Jeff Bridges.
Yeah.
Amazing film. And by the way, I have to do my quick shout out. Behind me right now is Hero Wanted,
with Gary
with Gary Cairns inside. Plus, dude, the amazing Chad Law Dog getting after it. So
the Law Dog, I love that.
Law Dog,
get that tattoo.
Dude, he should have shirts. He should have a full thing mixed with Law Dog on it. But just, dude, when it comes down to it, you're right. If you have the stories, everything, and whether it comes from me or from somebody else, right, whatever it is, I think the same goes true for what I said about actors who are the best for the role.
Right.
If you have the story and you see it clearly, and yeah, maybe there's a little tinges here and there. We have to remember in our industry, I can come up with tons of stories. I can't tell you how many times I have written a script and then I've been told, hey, it's getting ready to be made. I'm like, cool, here's the new script. And then I look at it and I go, why? Why would you hurt the script like that? Why would you hurt the story? You took away everything that made these characters matter. You took away everything that did this or that. And it hurts. So we all know that even if we have a good story, we're going to have this inclination to be like, okay, well, it's going to get switched anyway. So let me just do the best story that I can. Let me write the best script I can. And then we'll see how many changes it goes through. Right. Unless you're someone like Chad Law, which has worked his butt off to get to where he is now.
Right.
Like Chad Law probably doesn't have very many people go through his scripts and go, let me see, let's change this, and this. Then Chad comes back and goes, yeah, no.
Yeah.
I'm not going to change that. This is the story I want to tell. This is what we want to do. So let's get it. And they're like, okay, never mind. Yeah, you're right, Chad. You're right, Law Dog.
So
Let's get after it.
But what do you feel like though, as far as the industry, and let's lean more towards indie, because indie, like for me, especially in the last couple, I would say in the last 4 years, I would say now 4 or 5 years, something like that. I think it's gotten to a point where there's definitely a market for it, but the market is very, it's people know what they want and they're giving just that, whereas mainstream, they do give people what they want, but they have like criteria. As far I think there's a major difference when it comes to that. So, for example, when you wrote Day Labor, was there a lot that was asked of you, like, hey, we should change X, Y, and Z, make sure you change it to this, or was it more along the lines of, hey, we're going to shoot this today, but we can't pull it off because there's not enough equipment or whatever the case may be, so we're going to change this now to this. Can you write a scene out that can fit this thing within the budget, because we thought we had enough, but we don't have enough. So can you write something out like that? Like, I'm wondering what that experience was for you with writing a script, because you told me now that you wrote a script. They said we're going to shoot tomorrow. Then all of a sudden you're like, that's not the script that I wrote. So I'm wondering what that was like for you with Day Labor. If you noticed there's a major difference about how that was handled, and then everything else that you've noticed that you experienced along the way that kind of fits along those lines with the indie, maybe even studio side as well too.
Well, honestly, Day Labor was handled very well. Day Labor did not have the same, I guess you could say, issue, or the same issue in my mind, was because R.L.S. Frazier literally, like, and I give Frazier 100% credit. That guy just, we got on the phone, we went back and forth. He told me ideas he had. He started giving me, like, I remember I was at AFM. I forget what year it was. So it must've been 2020, that same end of that year, but it was the online AFM. I remember being part of that and having Frankie, my buddy, in the same room. We're staying basically at the Universal. I forget the Hilton at Universal, but we're staying there with great Wi-Fi. And Frazier's talking to me the entire time, just being like, ooh, I'm thinking this, and maybe we could add this. And, we need this scene here to show this. Can you write that for me? Get this here. Well, I'm going back and forth with Frazier. And it was such a collaborative experience that at the end, I looked at it and went, I knew if there was any changes, I knew where it was kind of going. I just didn't know how they were going to edit it together, or how they were going to change the importance of certain characters or not. Some of that was changed just in the edit of where I thought, oh, this person should have this. Oh, it's just the acting. It's not this, it's not that. But Frazier did amazing. Frazier, just the collaborative effort that we had back and forth on Day Labor was a really great experience, because I was like my first script getting made that was at this indie level. And I think that's the other proud thing for Day Labor for me, is that it's not the first script I wrote ever, but definitely the first one that got made. And it just led to other things going, and meeting new people, and meeting Gary from Day Labor, reaching out to him, talking to him, and then suddenly being like, okay, well, here's Deadly Games, here's 72 Hours, here's Out of Hand, there's this, that, cool. And then it just sparks it. But in the indie world, it's so great, because you hit it on the head, Rob. They give the people what they want. They want action. Do you want action? Yeah, we'll give you action. All right, we're gonna give you action, 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 action. That's from Kevin too. Kevin's like, action. That's what people want to see. Action. You're right. I'm like, you're right. But then it's like, there is room for horror. Like everybody's like, oh, well, horror's been diluted, and there's too many horror films in the industry. It's like, yeah, but people want to see it. It crosses bounds. There's not a language gap. There's no language barrier when it comes to action films and horror films, because sadly, what speaks volumes? Well, violence speaks any language.
Right.
People can see this going on. They don't have to really be, oh, he's fighting this person to save this person. Got it. I don't need an explanation. And so that's why some of it's super simple. Like some of the action films in the indie world are like super simple plot, but they do action very, very well.
Right.
Cool. Jesse V. Johnson, you had him on your show. He does an amazing job with action. The movie Debt Collectors with our buddy Louis, Mandalore, just, he kills it in there. And Scott Adkins, I'm a huge fan of, but when you have a director like a Will Kaufman, like a Jesse V. Johnson, like, and they're doing this so well, just action on the screen. I mean, even Christian Sesma, who does action so well on screen. It's just like they're giving the people what they want.
Right.
So, I mean, even my buddy Frankie, when he directed Ride, it's like, I'm going to give him a perfect view of what a film should look like. It's going to be cinematic. It's going to be this or that. And we're going to give the people what they want. This is what they want to see. Then we're going to give it to them. And then you have in the main world now, the kind of main industry, the film community, where it's like, well, they want this, but if we just put these parameters into it and we do this, that, I mean, I'm not going to beat around the bush. Did you see Madam Web?
No, I had no interest in checking it out. No, I didn't.
Don't.
No.
Don't. Don't watch it.
Well, because Dakota Fanning said that when she signed on, she got just like how you experienced. She got a script that was she said was really good. When we shot it, it was not the same story, and I was like, well, that's expected. I would think, for that to be a case there, but what she described was like it was literally from A to Z, which is nothing compared to what it was initially to how it ended up at that point. But yeah, that was essentially my point though, because a lot of studios do that. In fact, Lewis was like, some of the people, the directors, they probably have it worse than indie directors when it comes to having to deal with the studios, because they're always, unless you're Christopher Nolan, Quentin Tarantino, where you have full control of your project, where they're not going to interfere. In fact, they're begging you to write another movie so you can get a hit out of your hands. But otherwise, everyone else has to go through the trenches and have to figure out how to deal with it rather than having to take full control of it. So it's interesting, but I'm always curious about how indies compares to that, because I feel like indies have more collaborative, whereas studio, depending on the person, tends to be a little bit more restricted. It's how I'm picking up from various people that I've spoken with.
Well, and that's what Dakota said as well, right? She's basically said, she basically put out there that, look, it was a collaborative effort by a committee of filmmakers who did this. That's why I only like when there's one filmmaker who has a vision instead of 18 different people or 5 people or 20 people who have a vision. It's like, why can't we just trust our creatives? Yeah. Let's trust the people with the ideas. Let's just trust them. They have the idea for a reason. Let's just do it. And if that director has a vision, we're going to just go with that one director, not these 2 directors, not this person who also assisted, directed, and did this, but also came in for this. It's like, look, instead of having a committee of all these people, that's why indie films are so great half the time. Like, you watch an indie film and go, man, that was actually good. I love that. Why did I like that so much? It's because you had one person with a vision who was able to accomplish the vision and gave you exactly what you wanted to see, but also what they wanted you to see. Right. And so it wasn't diluted. They didn't add any fluff to it. They didn't add all this other hyperbole to it. They were just like, look, this is what you're getting. This is the vision I got, and I'm going to put it on screen for you. Boom, watch it.
I actually want to change angles here with you on something, because there is something that, I pointed out before we more or less kind of got started here, that I'm actually really curious with you about how, because the way things are going for you right now, it looks like things are turning out pretty good, because you've talked about how Day Labor had presented you opportunities with people you've met, gained some friendships and more working opportunities as well too. And I'm hoping it really does take off for you. But what I was really curious with you, though, is because of, it was actually kind of surprising, to be honest with you, when I saw it in your social media post with regards to your faith, because I talked to Devaney about this before, who herself is a Christian. And considering the work that she's done, which is mainly horror movies, but, not just like horror films with a lot of visceral violence in some ways too. And I was always curious to I was asking her about like how that parlays into her faith. Like, where does that come from, and how do you deal with this? And, is there a bit of a question that you have about, am I doing the right thing, and so on and so forth. I even talked to Bill Orbers as well too, who's worked with Gary and Luke for their film in Monumental, I think. Yeah, Monumental. I'm sorry. So like, I've talked to them about their perspective on themselves, their faith, and how that parlays into their career, and how they've conducted themselves in the beginning, how they are conducting themselves now, what's changed for them, and so on and so forth. And they pretty much give them consistent answers, just with obvious little differences as far as the perspectives are concerned. But for you specifically, though, I'm wondering how that actually translates into what you're doing, because Devaney says she prays, and then I asked her more in depth about, like, because she said she gets answers, but the answers don't come right away. And I'm wondering, does that mean, do you think God's leaving you behind, or just doesn't care to answer you? Like, what does that mean for you? And she gave me a really wonderful explanation from her perspective. But I'm wondering for yourself though, how that helps you, if you use that as a way to help make a decision, or do you trust yourself to make a decision, or do you literally go to pray for an answer for guidances? Because I'm wondering, because you talked about, you watch various films, horror movies and action films, but I always wonder if there's always like a sense of like, should I be watching this because of my faith? I don't know. I don't want to, see these type of things. I'm always curious about where that how you handle that for yourself, and where you got to the point where you're comfortable to say, I thought Evil Dead was fantastic. I love that movie. It was a great film, but you're not going to take that to church to watch it with everybody else there. You see what I'm saying? So I'm wondering how you go about that, and making coming to this to terms with yourself when it comes to that, and yet being confident with yourself and your relationship with God. And you mentioned Jesus Christ as well too. So I forget the elongated question, but I hope you understand why I'm starting off with that here too.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior.
Right.
Even in the Bible says, through, there's no way to the Father except through him. To me, there's a fine line with everybody. I try not to swear at all. If I do, I usually say I'm sorry if people laugh at me, because I try not to cuss. I do music that I really don't cuss in whatsoever. I think that there's so many other words in the English dictionary that you can use that doesn't always need, profanity. When it comes down to it, of course, I pray. I pray about everything that I do. Evil Dead is the cutoff point, really.
Okay.
I don't watch any demonic, like Exorcist movies, things like that. I don't watch. I consider them gateways. And yet I love horror films. I think it was because I was made fun of as a kid. My mom was very protective, and she was right to keep me protected from rated R films and stuff growing up as a kid. And, I remember a Halloween party where they're watching Halloween 4. I'm sitting there. This scene comes up where there's nudity. They all tell me that I can't watch it, that I should go underneath the pool table and hide, and they'll let me know when I can come out to watch it. It sticks with me viscerally, because that was the moment where I felt like a complete schlub. I felt like, man, why I'm underneath this pool table. Everybody's laughing at me. I know they're laughing at me. I actually went under the pool table. What's going on? And I was that overweight kid who got made fun of a lot and picked on a lot kind of growing up. And then, it hit a point where they were just like, oh, we can pick on you because, you can't watch these things. You're so protected. You're so this. And I think after that moment, Rob, I went, oh yeah, you think this? And then I went on a spree. I watched every single thing I could. The minute I hit a certain age, I was like, boom, I'm watching every horror film that I can. And I fell in love with the emotional responses that you get from people. I fell in love with Dario Argento and Tobe Hooper with the original Texas Chainsaw. I fell in love with not everything Wes Craven, but some Wes Craven, Guillermo del Toro, you name it. I went just down. John Carpenter, obviously, the original Halloween, but then also The Thing, and They Live, which is an underrated movie.
Yeah, I think so too.
So it's like I fell in love with all this that was horror. But I mean, I'm even writing right now. I'm writing a Christian-based horror film, and everybody's like, "What? How can you do that?" I'm like, "Look, there is darkness in the world. Right. There is this in the world. There are visceral things that happen. It's kind of like what you said too. We tell a story from this angle when there's, just as mean as people from this culture. It's like, well, if that's really what the church believes in, is that there is, Satan is real, this and this is real. And while I'm not going to lift that up, I'm going to say a true Christian experience is experiencing that darkness and then coming out on the other side. So I guess to answer your question in a more simple way, is saying, it's not signs. It's not necessarily hearing God. I have heard, and it's going to sound crazy to some people, but I've heard Jesus talk to me where it's been the simplest of, I didn't pray or sing songs, sing praise songs for years. Suddenly I put a CD in my car and I start singing to a hymn, and I literally hear, oh, it's good to hear your voice again. That's it. That's all I heard. It's good to hear your voice again. And I just was like, oh, I started breaking down in tears. I started crying. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe. And it was such a visceral experience that when there's people in the industry, you can tell, because we try to lift Jesus, they needs to get done. And just like the film I'm trying to, based on Cannibal Holocaust, about the main director, Gary's character, being so infatuated with Cannibal Holocaust that he's actually trying to do that in real life. And he wants to make it an art and creative. However, I took that story and I wanted realism. And yeah, but there's a redemption story. Once again, it kind of comes back to what we were talking about before. I love redemption stories because truly, to me, what faith is about is being covered in grace and redeemed through our Savior Christ, who died on the cross for us. And getting that grace is so amazing and poignant to me that he's the person I look to. And if something isn't meant to be, I will know where this isn't happening, this or this. Let me change this. Yeah, I'm going to help cut down the cost for special effects, but yet it doesn't help drive the story. Let me have actually a good story about redemption, revenge, about a character who is at the lowest of lows, but yet morality is still his holding point, where he still holds on everything too. So if I make three-dimensional characters that are based actually in a realm of reality, then I can go about a story and go, okay, cool. I feel more comfortable doing this as a Christian or a man of faith, because it tells a story that a lot of people deal with and a lot of people go. And it's in moments like this where I always want to shout out my faith, and start off. I feel like I'm doing a professional sport where the first thing, it's like, I like to thank God, Jesus, my Savior, ultimately, right. Thank that. And I'd like to thank my teammates after, and my family. But I do that. I did watch your interview with Devaney, and she had a lot of great points. I think that you talking about faith in general is huge, because it seems to be a taboo thing to talk about, period, is to talk about one person's faith is to be like, oh, we have another Bible thumper here. Oh, really? Well, you're hypocritical. You watch this, you watch that, you do this movie and that movie.
Right.
I tell stories and I'm creative, but that is only a gift given to me from above. I know other people are creative, this or that, but they don't judge you for what you believe in. And I hold those people close because they can keep you in check, but you also sit there going, yeah, I'm going to keep proclaiming what I am and who I follow. And to me, that's the most important thing. When you said the thing about, do you hear an answer? Like Devaney doesn't hear an answer. Sometimes he doesn't. God's a little busy. My brother once said, my brother who has a crazy story. My brother's like, look, I believe in the Trinity. I believe in this or that. God is the Father, right? He's a little busy. That guy's busy. You know what? I pray to Jesus because Jesus probably is going to answer me more often than not than God, because God's busy. He's like the CEO. So you can't just go right to the CEO. You got to go to this guy first and then you get to it. And I'm like, that is funny, but probably the truth. So
I never heard it from that perspective. I think it actually.
So I always I pray to Jesus, man. I pray to Jesus. I pray to him. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, you're right. He's busy, man. God's busy with all this stuff. I'm going to pray to Jesus. I might get an answer back a little quicker.
Well, so explain to me about something, because I've asked this question before, and I think I may have asked with Devaney too, but I've always had this curiosity about people who believe things happen for a reason, because I personally do not, and I'm not saying anyone who is they're wrong. I'm not coming from that perspective, but I've always been really curious about that, because at least from my perspective, whenever I hear people say that they believe things happen for reasons, because there are good things that are happening at that moment for them. And I'm not saying that because good things happen, of course you're going to say that. That's not really where I'm coming from. But typically, like I always come from a I don't know if this is probably a kind of a more or less a negative set of lenses that I have here, but like there's a lot of good that comes out of this that I see people do. But at the same time, I also see some people that I thought were good that they had selfish intentions, or they had bad intentions, if you will. and then you hear very horrible things that happen to people in life where, like, if you see it, it would tear you apart. And if you, when you listening to it, it tears you apart. But, having the visual will certainly just make it worse, I would think. And I'm thinking about, like, hearing all these horrible things and stories that I've come across. And I'm like, this world is really, really bad. But I don't get to see that every day because I'm seeing domestic stuff. I'm seeing a lot of, like, first class problems. And then even with these first class plot problems, people can be very selfish, but why are they behaving that way? Is there a reason for that? And then when you get to know them, you realize that you're not a bad person. You're just really, I hate to say it like this, but something, you're just really dumb, or two, you just don't know any better. And it sucks for you, but I'm not going to hang out with you. So the idea of things happen for a reason doesn't click for me. And again, I'm not saying that you are wrong, but I'm just curious about your perspective on where that comes from for you. Because obviously you mentioned before about faith, and you think that God gives you these gifts and he's giving you these opportunities. But if things don't turn out well for you, where all of a sudden, like, you're not getting the scripts, your scripts are not getting bought, no one's listening to your stories, and despite the fact they're good ideas, it's not working out. What reason is for that then? Like, what's the whole purpose of that, despite the fact you were so confident that this is working out because it's meant to happen, but now it's no longer happening? Like, I'm curious to see about your perspective, like, where that all comes from and how you think about that, if that were to happen there. And I hope it doesn't, but I'm just curious about how you think you would handle that if it really does get taken away from you.
There's moments where I have been through, but I do believe that everything happens for a reason. And even the bad things, whether it's living in a warehouse, for cheaper rent, don't have a shower, but have to go use, an Anytime Fitness, having a mattress on the floor, but finding the love of your life, and then being like, well, I'm going to save up money in this, I guess. And it's falling down below in the darkness. And just, I've cried a lot, done things, but I was able to finally, through the bad time, I was able to raise money to buy a ring for my wife. That was the good thing that happened out of the bad. Whether it's me getting a DUI back in 2018, because I didn't want to stay at a party. I decided to go here. This or this happened. My girlfriend at the time, or fiance, scared about, where I was, couldn't get a call, this, that, ended up in a drunk tank. I lost a lot of money and had to go do classes and other things too, from that. And then from that comes an understanding of, look, something bad happened to me. This was that. My dad was disappointed in me, disappointed that I didn't want to tell him about what happened, him being an ex-cop.
Yeah.
And then suddenly being like, yeah, I don't really want to tell you about my DUI that I got. So going down that stretch and doing community service and, being on a probation for this long. And, I've been jumped in my life, jumped, beaten up, bruised, bloodied on the street, wake up in a hospital, and then suddenly realize my entire face has been, black and blue, and it's puffy and bruised up. Cool. Through all those moments, some people would be like, man, that really sucks. What'd you do during those moments? What happened? Like, how can you still think that? I'm like, you know what? I'm still breathing. Yeah. I'm still living. God, obviously, I was either supposed to get a wake up call but I'm still alive. So it's not my time yet. When people say, look, there's a plan for everything, this or that, there is. I only believe that, not to even go off your own opinion, because I think everybody should be entitled to their opinion. But when you go through certain experiences and you go through sleepless nights and you go through not having a house or not having an apartment or not being in the best situation you possibly could, it sounds like, oh, well, you haven't lived this, that. It's like, I haven't, from not knowing my biological father, but finding out when I was 13, to suddenly just, doing these crazy things and just living life to the fullest and whatever. I found out a lot about myself by my dad being there for me, who adopted me at 6 months old, who loved me like I was his own and I am his own. And I just suddenly realized that to me was like the love of Christ, is that, oh, I may not be actually legit, like you're son, but you're loving me, and you love me unconditionally because you want me. You want me. And to feel wanted is such a huge just feeling, is to feel wanted, but then to go through certain things that are the worst in your life, or you think they're the worst. There's always someone that has it more in life who, yeah, this happened to you, but what about this person? You're like, no, I know. And I'm blessed that I wasn't killed this, and blessed that, I did end up in a drunk tank and not this and that. I'm blessed to have been a youth minister and teach to teach kids about Jesus and his love. So no matter what happens to me, whether another script ever gets made or another story ever gets put out, I'm in this story. I'm in with my own self, my own life. And if none of that was to happen, and Day Labor and these other ones were the only films to see the light of day, I would be okay with that, because to me, that's what Jesus wanted. That's what God wanted. This and this happened for you. Cool. You fulfilled your dream. You did it. Now I got this in store for you. And it's me having to have that wherewithal to understand that and to be like, okay, cool. It's not of me. This life isn't of me. I have to sometimes put it into my Savior's hands and let him dictate what happens. Because if I can't do that, then I can't truly be a man of Christ and truly follow in those footsteps and be an evangelist, or to spread the word like I'm supposed to. I can only do that through conversations like this, but also when films are made, yeah, that's a story. That's this. I'm a Christian man, so I'm going to tell you this, and that I was lucky enough to have this opportunity. Some people aren't lucky enough to have the opportunity. So to me, having a film come out May 3rd, I am blessed beyond belief, because that may be the only film that ever gets released. And if another one gets released afterwards, amazing. Right. I'm blessed beyond belief, but it all stems from that. And if I ever get out of that mindset, then that's a bad trickle effect, because then I start doing things for myself. I start doing things for my own pride, for my own honor. And then I'm no longer honoring this life that has been just blessed to me. So that's just kind of where I see it, or my perception.
Could you explain about, because I guess you said something really interesting that I never really considered asking, but since you mentioned it, I'm really curious to see if you can explain a bit further with this, because I've heard this said before, where, if I do things for myself and not, let God or Jesus Christ dictate my path, because they obviously know what's best. I've always wondered what that really meant. And I understand what you mean by that, but I think what I'm trying to emphasize more on with you is that, do you not trust yourself enough to say, I can make a good decision? Or is it more like I have to let God make the decision for me? Because I always want to know, when someone says, if I make these decisions for myself, it's not going to turn out good. But you've learned enough for you to understand that I've made bad ones before, and bad ones like this before. And I know that if I make this decision like this again, no good is going to come out of it here. So I'm smart enough to know that I should not make decisions here. I'm not saying that you don't need God to tell you. That's not what I'm implying here. But because I guess what I'm trying to say is that if they've taught you that, do you feel like they would trust you to say, you can make your own decisions now? We know you're going to make good ones, and we're going to step out of here for you to figure it out for yourself. Do you understand where I'm coming from with that question?
Yeah, I would say right to there, that's the human condition again, right?
Okay.
Humans are inherently sinful. We inherently make bad decisions. We do it naturally. Even people in the Bible, when you look at Job, when you look at certain characters in the Bible, even David, who eventually sent her husband out and was like, he's on the front lines, he's going to die. And so then I can get Bathsheba for myself and can't wait. When Job's sitting there and he's just like, I have everything in the world, but why is it all getting taken away from me? God, who are you? God, why? God, why me? Why this? And God's like, were you there when I created this? Were you there? This? And it goes like 2 whole chapters of God just berating Job, taking Job down a peg, just being like, hey man, I did this to test you, and I did this and this and that. You're good. Just trust me. I'm the Lord. And he's like, oh Lord, I'm sorry. God, please forgive me. He's like, all right, cool. And he gets everything back. You have Daniel in the lion's den, who basically adheres to everything he's supposed to, gets thrown in the lion's den, but comes out unscathed because he held to the word of God. There's so many different things within the Bible where you go, there was a lot. Samson and Delilah. Samson gives into his lust, gives into temptation, lets her know of his secret power, and then suddenly hair gets cut, eyes gouged out, and he's suddenly sitting there without his strength anymore. We are so inherently evil and sinful that it's not that I don't have to go to God and be like, Lord, is this a good idea? What do you think? But I do love the guiding hands. It's like going to, sounds really bad, but it's like going to Master Yoda. If I am a Jedi, I'm going to go to the most experienced person and be like, so Yoda, what do you think, man? What do you think I should do? Huh? Dagobah, right? Is this cool? Should I go here? Get on the Millennium Falcon? Should I go fight, Darth Vader? Yoda's going to give me some wise wisdom. Do or do not. There is no try. Thank you, I guess. Yeah, got you, Yoda. I'm going to do it. So I always look at it as a guiding hand. Is just like, I pray, I go to my faith so that I can be like, Lord, even before I did this interview, I took a lap around and was just like, Jesus, just help me have the right answers. Help me say the right things. Don't make me look like a fool. Just guide me, because I know what I want to say and I know who I am as a person, but there's no one that knows me better. Even my mom, my dad, but there's no one who knows me better than my creator. So I go to him, I talk to them. My wife knows me very well, but not as well as my connection with Jesus. So I go there for a guiding hand. I go there for guidance. Do I always expect an answer? No. But sometimes random things happen where it's like, man, am I supposed to be in this industry? Am I supposed to do this? And then I end up on last tour home in September playing my first acting role as a villain, which I was like, man, I shouldn't do this. I cuss a lot. I do this, whatever. And then everybody I meet on the set happens to be, oh yeah, we're talking about religion. We're talking about Jesus. I'm like, well, this is weird. I've never been on a set where people openly talk about their faith. And then I go to a background to be a background person on a film that was doing Warner Brothers studio lot. We're there. And next thing you know, I meet another man of faith. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay. So we start talking and then I meet another person. I'm just like, this is crazy. Am I just talking about it? Are they bringing it to me? How is this working? And it just so happens that it kind of comes up. So at the same time, I guess to answer your question is, no, I don't need to ask him what I should do, because I'm getting pretty good at realizing, what's wrong and what's right in my moral compass. However, I always like to go for guidance and to have that conversation beforehand, because I think it strengthens me as a Christian male, but it also keeps me grounded so that I don't get too full of myself, to realize that it isn't me, it's something else. And so that will keep me grounded to maintain the person who I want to be, which is kind, loving, inclusive. I want to be generous. I just don't got the money for it. There's a lot of things I want to do, but some people are blessed in certain ways and others aren't. And so for me, I just go, that's a fact of life. And I'm going to use what I've been given as strengths to hopefully make a better life for myself. But it's not about this life. It's about after. Am I setting myself up for when I pass away, at least in the belief of Christians, is I want to be in the eternal place that my Father, died for me for. If Jesus was willing to die on the cross for my sins, and yet I make all these choices and I don't even include him in it and just go, yeah, thanks. Right before I die, I'm going to say, I believe you, Lord. So then I'm good, right? I'm in heaven. I get to be at the pearly gates. I'm going to tell Peter what's up, tell him I'm on the list. I don't know if that's how it works. So we're all human, Rob, at the end of the day. We all make mistakes. We're all fallible. And to me, I just try to make the best decisions that I can. And yeah, I do say a little prayer before a lot of things just to make sure I'm on the right plane. And hopefully the plane doesn't crash. But yeah, that's just kind of where I guess my mentality is, where
How,
my
how do
perspective
you
comes into place.
how do you deal with something really trying? For example, like if someone's really just pushing you, knowing how you probably would have handled it back then, but considering that you have a new outlook on life and you have a different perspective on yourself and you have a better understanding how you want to handle things. But I'm wondering if you ever gotten to the point, even despite the fact that you were in a much happier place, things seem to be going pretty well for you at this point. But I wonder if you've ever been pushed to your limits where you're like, this is crazy. Like I can't. Like you want me to go? Like I'm wondering how you respond to just being pushed to the point where like you are just done. Like I can't do this anymore. And if you do come to that, is it easier for you to go back? You know what? But I understand there's a reason for this here for me to go through this, or does it take time for you to kind of get back into the swing of things for yourself, where you realize that I forgot, I this is why I'm going through this, or whatever the case, because I've always been curious about, because from not saying everybody, I know as Christians like this, but you see one thing and then behind closed doors you see something else. I'm not implying that with you, but I'm wondering about when you get to that point where if people look at Sean and say Sean's a really great guy, but they happen to catch you that one day where you're in a really, really bad mood, like that's not the guy that I met yesterday. How do you think you would deal with, like, how do you learn to deal with that for yourself when you get to that limit of like how far you are willing to handle certain things along the way?
Yeah, I mean, I try my best to be the same person no matter what. Anybody I meet, you're going to know that I'm a passionate person, that I love my wife, that I openly want to be generous with just people and have great conversations. But I would say, if, like I said, everybody fails, everybody falls short of the glory of God in some moment of their life. And for me, when it's happened, I have, a lot of people don't want to ask for forgiveness, whether it's from Jesus or not, or God, or whether it's from a family member or a loved one or a friend. There's something within us that it's hard to ask for forgiveness, especially if you aren't religious at all. It's like forgiveness still is a natural thing to be like, hey, to forgive somebody. It doesn't just always stem from Christianity. It stems from a human condition. I would argue, because I am Christian, that it stems from that, but everybody can have their own interpretation and worldview. I would then say that I'm usually not afraid to ask for forgiveness. And if people aren't willing to forgive you, that's fine. They're humans. I'm asking for it genuinely. And if you can understand that and know that in your heart, then I hope that you can forgive me and that we can move on past this.
Right.
I have fallen on my knees before. I've cried. I have, asked for forgiveness from God. I have called people up and been like, yeah, look, I'm sorry this and this happened. This wasn't how I intended it to be. I can't believe this happened, but I'm trying my best to make it work to the best of its ability. I think that we as a humanity and us as people just need to do a better job at just treating people. Gary always says it the best. If people just acted like Jesus, would be a great place. He loves Jesus. Jesus is the man. Like if it was Jesus and people acted like that, dude, man, we'd be good to go. Like his teachings, everything. If people could just adhere to it, they would be great. And that's teachings of just a lot of religions, right? They're very similar. Treat people with respect, honor your mother and father. The golden rule, just like treat your neighbor like you would want to treat yourself.
Right.
Like there's certain things where it's just like they're common sense, but common sense ain't so common. But it's common sense to be like, let me treat you very well as a person because you deserve that as a person. And even if you wrong me, yeah, I'm a person. I hold a grudge. I may hold this or that. But honestly, if you were to come down to me, probably be like, look, man, I'm sorry. This, that happened. Can we just move on and do this? 9 times out of 10, and only the one time because I am a human, but 9 times out of 10, I'm going to be like, you know what? Yeah, let's move forward. What do you want to do? Let's write something together. Let's work on this project together. Let's do this together. I'm excited to do it. I can't wait to work with you. It doesn't matter if you're wronged or not. Wronged or being wronged is a perception in one's mind of some kind of discourse that you feel happened. If I can let that off my chest and verbalize it, it doesn't matter what I get back, or if people say things to you like, oh, well, that's not very manly of you. You're not being a man if you cry, or you're not being a man if you do this. It's like, what's the definition of a man? What's like, everybody wants to assign a gender or stuff to people, but it's just like, look, as for me as a man, but anybody, however you identify yourself as, we should all treat people the same.
Right.
Like, we should all be able to forgive. We should all be able to love one another. And if we can't do that, then I feel like there's something not wrong with you, but something that you have to kind of figure out on your own. If you can't let that go, or if you can't apologize to someone, or if you can't go to somebody and be like, look, I messed up, I did this or that, then you're saying something more so about yourself than you are about the other person, if you're not able to get to that spot. And that's another reason why sometimes I'm not able to forgive. I couldn't forgive some people for a very long time. That's why I do go to Jesus and ask for guidance, where I'm like, how do I do this, man? I'm angry. I'm upset. How do I get past this? Give me some kind of sign, or give me a way in so the conversation can start, and I'll take it from there. Just give me a way in. Give me the ability to do this. And honestly, I have no regrets. No regrets for anything in my life, from where I went to college, from what I've done, from the DUI to anything. I have no regrets. My 5-year anniversary with my wife is May 17th. I always joke that it's the 18th, so she gets upset. I'm always like, May 18th, right? May 18th. Oh, sorry. No, the 16th, the 16th. She's like, you know what day it is. I'm like, you're right. But I'm celebrating 5 years of marriage to a woman that I love more than anything. She keeps me grounded. She keeps me sane. And I absolutely love her. I don't know what I would do without her. And that's kind of the same way I look at relationships in life, is like, if you're not able to forgive, do this or that, guess what? That relationship probably isn't for you. Yeah. I'm not saying that the path is broken or the bridge is gone, but somewhere down the line, we may be able to work together or be able to rekindle some kind of relationship. But until then, you just got to live your best life.
It's funny you mentioned 5 years. Happy early anniversary, by the way, for both of you. But this year, for my wife and I, will be 18 years. And it's hard to believe we're almost near the 20-year mark.
Congrats, Rob. Almost 20 years.
Almost 20 years. Crazy.
Look, you're doing something right, Rob. You're doing something right.
It's like, because we were just discussing last night about our relationship. We talk all the time, obviously, but it's one of those things where, like, because the subject of our relationship, it comes up often, but from different angles, memories, and whatever else, and sometimes it's very short-lived as far as the conversation. But what was interesting though is that we talked about where we started and where we are now, and we have certainly gotten better in handling our relationship. There's no doubt about that. But I think one of the biggest things for me that I've learned, that if I hadn't gone through some of the things I've gone through with my wife, of course, I don't know if I would ever looked at it the same, which was like learning to just admit you're wrong. Like, that was the biggest thing that was hard for me to do. It was really hard for me to admit you're wrong. Shut up, listen, just stop bitching and moaning, just listen, and you'll understand what's really going on, and then fix yourself. Like, it's not like I think about it now, it's like, it wasn't hard to do it, but at the time it was such a difficult thing to admit to, and not only admit to myself, but to admit to her too. Right. And I think it's a lot has to do with how you were raised, and I'm not going to blame anybody for that, because I know better now, but it's really weird that we were just talking about this, as you mentioned 5 years, that like admitting that you were wrong was the hardest thing for me, and then having to fix it was even harder. And it's crazy how because I remember I've seen a lot of people's relationships where I remember like, why don't you just tell the truth? Just some excuse, and it's like the dumbest ones too. It's not like, well, it's not that hard. I mean, all you did was this. Yeah, but you know how she is. It's like, I don't think she's really like that. And then you find out she really is. And so it's very complicated. But I guess, there's a reason why I always ask about do you believe things have a reason? Even though I come from a perspective, I don't believe it does. But when I think about my wife's relationship, there's a part of me that's like, this has to be for a reason. Like, you have it really, really good right now. You happen to be in a position where you told someone about a blind date that was supposed to be said, didn't work out. And they just happen to mention your, at least at the time, my soon to be wife. And I'm thinking about, like, if I had never said anything about it, where would my life been at this point? Maybe there's a reason for all this here. And my wife is very much a believer in that as well too, about things happen for a reason. She's like, this is the reason why we're together. I was like, I believe there is a good reason for that, but I don't believe there's a reason for that. But it's slowly starting to be more like, well, maybe you shouldn't be so like, what's the word? Just say there's no reason for it, and then hold on to that view. And that's slowly starting to change for me, but which is why I'm questioning it a lot, because I'm like, do I really truly believe that? Any answers? I don't really know, but I'm still holding on to the fact that I don't think there's a reason, but that's because I don't know, if that makes any sense. So I don't mean to, go off on a tangent with myself with that, but but
no, it makes sense. I mean, the hardest thing to do is say you're wrong. I still have issues with it now, even with my wife. She'll tell you straight up. I will sometimes won't say I'm wrong. I'll just keep going like I'm 100% right, and then later I'll think about it a little bit, whatever, and I might
go
over
you too.
And it eats it.
It's just like it won't let you go. And I'm like, that's the worst feeling I've that because it's like, it's your fault, and she's right, and it eats at you because you just refuse to admit to it. And it could have been resolved if you said yes.
But if you say they're right, it gives them too much power. All right, that's what it is. If you say
well, I'm of the belief though that I've never, I guess I took it for granted, but you've heard the saying, happy wife, happy life. I believe that 100%. I really, really believe that if my wife is happy, I'm happy. And it's not coming from a perspective like, whatever she wants. It's nothing like this. It's really about like, are you good? Are we good? What did I do? Like, and then you start to realize that how insecure you are as well too in the process. Like, oh my God, like am I really that insecure? And she's like, yeah. I was like, oh my God, and you're still with me? And she's like, yeah. I was like, okay. Oh, it's like, it's really weird, but but I do believe in that notion, happy wife, happy life, because there have been times where she was miserable and I'm like, I'll get over it. And I just could not live with myself anymore for however many months I had that thought process there. But yeah, it's crazy. And it took a while for me to finally realize that. But when I finally did, believe me, it changed so much for me. It made things so much easier for me, to the point where I don't even think about it as much as I used to. So it's for the better. But a lot of it has to do with my wife. My wife is the biggest thing in my life that really made the most changes for me. And I think in the last couple of years, I really started giving her a lot more credit, because it's, I really can't give any other credit other than to her. So it's funny how relationships work out, but if you really make it work, you'd be surprised how well it can work at the end of the day. So for you to go to that 5-year mark, I'm hoping for 25 more for you guys at that point.
Dude, hey, and I can only hope for another 30. So 30 years for you, hit that 50-year mark. It's a beautiful thing. When you see people together for 50 years, and my grandparents hit it for 50 years, it was just, it's so beautiful, because you're just like, man, you're living with this. And then you see how they act, and they argue this, that, but you're just like, yeah, but that's arguing because they've been fit together 50 years. Like, of course they're going to get underneath their skin for this or this reason, whatever, but that they love each other, and you can tell. And, and my grandmother, Levon, rest her soul, when she passed away, we were so worried about my grandpa, passing. And sure enough, my uncle passed away 2 years after that, like right before COVID, then during COVID, and then my grandpa passed away shortly after. It just was like domino effect, where it just kind of boom, 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 boom. And, I think the truth is that, we say, get over it. We don't need them, this or that. And then you're with someone for so long, and for 50 years, 20 years, even just for you guys, 20 years. Yeah. But like, you're with someone for so long that when you don't have that person, man, it's just like, this is kind of crushing. I'm not used to not used to not having this person with me. I'm not used to having this person in my life. And I couldn't imagine it. I always pretend, it always feels like you're annoyed with your significant other and everything.
Yeah.
And it's not annoyance, because at the end of the day, you're just like, man, if you weren't here, I'd be so upset.
Yeah.
And I'd be so sad. You just realize you need that person. That was it. That's what I was going to say. You can go, because
that was that was the mic drop there. Well, I guess what I remember what I was going to say. I was just going to say that my wife and I had a conversation last night, actually, believe it or not, where we were talking about, she said to me, I can't imagine living my life without you. I can't live my life without you too. She's like, I don't know what would do if you happen to die. And I was just like, because I think I would move on. I was like, well, I don't know if I could do that, because like I'm so used to being around you. And the only thing that came to mind was for me to say, and I hope this happens. I really believe it would, but I hope it does happen. Was that we're gonna die together. We're gonna go to bed and we're gonna be comfortable. We're gonna be happy, still in love, and then we're gonna pass. That's the ideal scenario for me. And she's like, yeah, that'd be really great. I was like, yeah. And then we held on to that. So the whole notion about like you dying, I'm dying before you, I was like, we're gonna drop all that nonsense. We're just gonna focus on us being together, literally to the day we die together. And that's what I want. And it would be much more satisfying to think about that than having the idea of to think about losing you. It's like, it makes me really not angry, but it bothers me, because like I can't imagine my life without her. Cause like she's at this house, and I love the idea that once you and I are done talking, I'm going to get up, go downstairs, and I'm going to see her. And that brings so much joy to me to think that. Or if she's stepping out and then I'm knowing she's going to come back, that brings a lot of happiness here to me. So, yeah, it's funny. You talked about your wife and then how this all led to this here.
I mean, it makes sense, dude. The conversation is that I can't tell you how many times I've even had the conversation where it's been like, oh yeah, so who's going to die first? Who's going to do this or that? It's a weird conversation to have with your significant other.
Oh yeah.
And then I'm always like, look, I'm going to die in a crazy way. There's no Notebook ending for me. I'm going out in a blaze of glory. I'm going to go from I'm going to skydive. My parachute isn't going to open. I'm going to leave it up to God. Parachute ain't going to open, and I'm going out. And then someone's just like, well, what if you still survive the fall? And I'm like, I never thought that far ahead. I'm like, I guess if I survive the fall,
you'll be in at that point.
Well, and then it was worth it. It's another lesson to be learned in my mind. You know what? Next time, don't leave it in your own hands.
Here's what I want to jump in with you, because we were talking about films beforehand. Because there's a number of films that are coming out, and some films are just that blows my mind. Like Oppenheimer just won recently with the Oscars, and I saw that movie with my son in theaters, and it was one of those experiences where I was happy that people were watching a movie that wasn't necessarily a spectacle, in the sense of like we need a big superhero film, if that makes any sense. Like this is a movie, and there's a name value behind it because this person brings value, and people saw the film and it did very well, and then they reaped the rewards, and then it got rewarded with as far as the Academy is concerned. But I'm wondering for yourself, though, that when it comes to your thoughts about the films you want to make and how things are changing, we talked before about the industry and the whole representation thing and things of that nature. Are you optimistic about the ideas you have, what you want to tell, and that because you are getting to know more people that are liking your ideas, like, do you feel optimistic that that things are going to work out well in terms of like presenting the ideas and then possibly getting made? Because obviously we know that films aren't easily made, and when they are made, if they ever get seen, but the fact that you got one movie coming out real soon, do you have some optimism about, there's a possibility that things can keep getting better from there? Might be slow, might be long, but it's going to happen. Like, do you have that optimism about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a really optimistic person. You can ask a lot of people. I like to consider myself a grinder, a hustler. We hop on different conversations. We try pitching different ideas. We try to keep moving forward. When it comes to myself personally, once again, it's just I always have that conversation with, if this doesn't happen, what's this? What's that? For me, I'm really excited about the ideas that I'm coming up with, ideas that I've been blessed to have. I'm really excited to see where it goes. I'm excited to, I'm going to be in a film we're filming in August. It's a faith-based film. It's actually a musical where I'm putting together some of the music for actually, like, I'm coming up with different of the lyrics, stuff like that, for P31 based on Proverbs. So that's fun. I'm excited to see Last Tour Home when it comes out finally, through Fireside Film Company. That's Bailey Tony and Miles Colesi. Just amazing. It looks amazing. It was filmed in Oregon. It looks great. It looked great on set. I just can't wait to see the actual once it's put together. But there's just so many stuff coming out that I'm just so blessed to be a part of. And Gary is just a worker, man. That guy's a grind horse. He works so hard. He has a job. He has a beautiful wife, and he just gets things done. He's always talking, and he's never a different person than who you meet. He's exactly who you meet. That's who he is. And he's going to kind of shoot it to you straight. He's not going to just, lie to you, beat around the bush. He's going to give you a blunt, usually offering of himself, which is great. And meeting these people and his circle and getting to know different people and having people in my camp like Frankie, or Brian Frank Visiglia, having him in my camp and just being like, dude, this guy's amazing. He's such a great writer. He writes scripts all the time. I can't wait till he can get more chances at being a director. If I can somehow help, or if God blesses me with the capability to help this and this person out, I'm going to do it, because it's, I think, my right to do that. It's been given to me by God to be like, hey, look, I'm blessing you with this and that, but you can't just hold it to yourself. You got to spread it out there. So I don't want to work with just one or two people. I want to work with so many people, and I want to be able to really get in there and to have these visions take place. And I mean, I have 15 screenplays right now where I could be like, you looking for something? Cool, kid. Let me give you a pitch quick. So here's my 15 concepts. Here we go. 2 minute elevator pitch. What do you think? And people would be like, we're looking for this. None of those really work. I'll be like, sounds good. I'll go to the next person. But I'm just going to keep grinding. And, just like I said about Gary, Chad Law does it all the time. Kevin, Louis, it's just always being a part of something, always trying to treat people with dignity, with respect. And that's just what I go off of. So am I optimistic about what's coming forward? Well, yeah, I am, because you put so much work into something that, just like I'm optimistic that your channel eventually is going to go from, 300 something views for this one to eventually you're going to have, 500,000 subscribers to 1 million subscribers, to where you don't really have to worry about having a full-time job. You can just interview people for a living because you love doing it. If that is in the plans and if that's in the cards, then it's going to happen. So I don't try to hold anything back or let anybody dictate what happens for me, because to me, it's like you're in control to a point of what goes on. Right. Like we've said about faith and everything, it's like, yeah, Jesus is in control for me. So if he doesn't want this to happen, if everything dried up, I already know what I have in store. Is I'm a husband, I'm a son, and I want to be a father someday. So I know that that's my next route. Okay. I know what's in store for me. If everything dried up and I got nothing else in the world, that's fine. But while I'm here and trying to make it happen, I'm going to try to be as kind as possible to people, try to respect people to the utmost, and be an honest version of myself, without just lying to you blatantly and saying this and that. I mean, I already told you in this interview that I had a DUI, I've had this, that stuff that I'm just open with because it's part of my past. It's part of what makes me me. And if I'm not able to say that, then I'm only lying to you and kind of doing what a lot of people do in the industry, where we want to give you this image, but we want to hide everything else under here. I don't care what's under here. It will come out eventually. People will figure it out. as the bigger you get, the more they want to destroy you. They want to bring you down a notch.
Yeah.
I figure if I already get to that before they can, where I already bring myself down, there's no way that they can do it. So it's only up from here.
I was actually curious about what's really important for you when it comes to filmmaking here, because you talked about like how you have ideas for stories or films you want to see made, that you're coming up with here. But when you're writing a movie and then you're seeing it being put together, to you, what's more important, an entertaining story or the message behind the story?
The message behind the story. And the reason I say the message behind the story is because everything has to have a reason. It has to have a purpose. And if you're not diving into the characters and having them have a real human, like if this happens to them and this happens to them, how do they come out of that? You can break it down by Blake Snyder's Save the Cat, or you can go through, the screenwriting in a nutshell, or whatever kind of outline you want to do. But it all starts with the hero's journey. And so when you do the hero's journey, you're setting up something for someone. There has to be a specific want and desire. And how are they going to attain that? What's their secondary want? What's their ultimate goal? What are they trying to get to? And if you don't have that, to me, it's not a story. It's just, a Taken story. There are kids here and there. It's going. It might be a fun, bless you, my wife. I said it might be a fun story, entertaining. And as long as you pitch it like that, and that's how you want to do it, then cool. Have your entertaining story. I think there's a place for it. For me, I like to have reasons behind characters. I like to have, the journey of this character. I want to have a purpose for what they're doing, why they're doing it, because I personally think that audience members attach themselves to those characters more often than they do to just this story. I think they get more ingrained and they want to watch that film over and over again because it has a true meaning. I'm not saying there is anything wrong with popcorn films, because I love sometimes you just need a mindless movie where you sit down and you watch something and you eat popcorn to it. And that's why I love action films, right? Yeah. I love action films because you can sit back and just be like, this is entertaining. I love it. I'm going to eat some popcorn, have a fun time. But for myself, I really do believe in, if it is an action film, why am I here watching it? Why do I care about the main character? I care about his friend. Why do I care if they defeat this lord? Or why do I care if they get his son back? He never liked his anyway. He treated him like crap the entire film. Why do I care if he gets him back? But it's the setup. It's right. How you write it. It's how you go across the story. And for me, it's always having a message, and not necessarily a message, but at least, so I guess the best way to put it is not necessarily having a message, but having purpose. So if it's a purposeful script where every character has a reason for doing something, I think it's a strong story to tell. If you're doing it for a message, that's fine, especially when it comes to like, hey, my faith-based one that I'm doing right now, the horror one, it's called The Creature. The entire thematic element of it is you can't do it on your own. So as much as you try to beat your addiction, whether it's to pornography, whether it's to alcohol, whatever addiction you may have, you can't do it by yourself. That's why we go to AA. That's why we talk to our mentors. That's why we do this. You sometimes can't get through these sinister things on your own. For me, I look to God. I look to Christ in order to help me and give me that strength. Some other people look to a mentor, look to their AA leader, look to their mom, their dad, their grandmother if they don't have their mom or dad. They look to their grandmother, their sister, their brother, somebody to help them through that. And to me, that's unique. It's unique to tell a story about, hey, we can't do it on our own because we have so many films where it's like, I am trained in Kung Fu and I know this and I know this, and this, and trust me, I'll do it on my own and I'm going to get it done. Yeah. And then he just goes and just kills everybody and he completely saves the day. And it's the old Sylvester Stallone and it's the everyman, right?
Yeah.
I'm just going to get it done. Oh, dude, I love them too. Honestly, they're the films. Once again, I mean, you look at Rocky as well, just because you have it behind you. Yeah. Rocky is an incredible story, and the story behind Rocky is almost even more impressive. Yeah. Where it's nobody wanted, like they liked the script, They didn't like Sly. They didn't think he had the right look. They weren't going to cast him as the character. You know what I mean? So it's like, oh, we're going to get this and this person. And finally he's like, no, look, only way I'm going to do it is if I am Rocky. And then you can have this script. Then you can do it. He invested in himself so much and was so confident in himself that once it happened, it completely changed his life and changed his course of his career until now even. Yeah. So it's like, I feel there's places for those films because I love those films. Just for me, I like having purpose-driven films, and occasionally I sprinkle in a film where I'm like, let's do entertainment value film. Let me just simple, tons of action. I'm going to write it down. It's going to be quick. And I hope if it gets made, I'm going to straight up say in the interview, I did this so we could eat popcorn. I did this so that we could sit back and enjoy it.
Do you think that, are you confident in yourself to say, if someone asks you, are you a good script writer? Are you a good storyteller? Do you have the confidence and say, yeah, I am. I'm really good at what I do? Or are you still getting comfortable in developing a port where you feel that that, okay, now that I've harnessed this, I've gotten this down. Yes, I can say confidently, I am good at what I do.
I can say confidently that I am a better screenwriter than when I first started. I remember Bethany Bruckner. I will never forget it. It was through Stage 32. I did a pitch to Millennium Films. The pitch went great. She loved the idea. All my friends had read the screenplay. They said it was good. She read it. She said, we'll consider it. We'll see what we can do. She got back to me, and bless her soul, because if she hadn't done this, I don't think I'd be even where I'm at to this day. She pretty much said in the best way possible, said, this sucked. This was not good. Your screenwriting is not good. The story was not good. The story wasn't there. This wasn't there. We're going to pass on it. And I was so heartbroken because I'm like, dang, Millennium Films did Expendables. They did this, they did that. I really wanted this film done through Millennium. But then once again, in my head, I was like, I have two options right now. I can either get better at screenwriting and buy books and start doing my own research. I even looked at film school and going for screenwriting, but that's going to cost an arm and a leg. So I was like, I'm going to go through and I'm going to go from Celtex and I'm going to get Movie Magic. My buddy Frankie's like, dude, get Final Draft. Final Draft's the way to go. I'm like, all right, Final Draft it is then. I'll do Final Draft. And I have learned so much over time of how to break down stories and how to create my own stories where it's second nature. There's still so much to learn. There's still so much that I can improve upon because I feel like no one ever reaches perfection. I don't even think Quentin Tarantino is perfect. I think he helps with his perfection by basically not doing many films to dilute himself, but also he gets to direct it as well and write it. So when it goes on the screen, it's exactly what he wanted. And I think that's the closest you can get to perfection as a writer is if you're a writer-director, because now you can control the creative vision, but also you can switch up the screenplay as you go now to your vision. All right, this isn't working. Okay, cool. Let me do the rewrite. Oh, shouldn't you go to the writer? You're like, you just give him a look. You're like, oh, that's right. You are the writer. Yeah, go right ahead. Yeah, fix it up. So they have the most, I think that's the closest you can get in this industry is being a writer director who is fully giving their creative vision. But yeah, I think I would say confidently, I am a better screenwriter now than I was back in 2011. And I'm only getting better with each and every script that I finish. You know, you have people that come up, and I work as a bartender for my side job. And I remember I'm sitting there and this guy's like, oh yeah, I'm writing this or that. I'm like, oh wait, you're a writer? He goes, yeah, I'm a screenwriter. I'm like, oh cool. What have you written, man? Like, what are you working on? He goes, I'm about 30 pages in, but you know, I'm going to finish it soon. It'll soon be done. I'm like, you haven't written a full script? And he goes, no, but you know, as a screenwriter, it just takes time. And I just stopped the conversation. I was polite, but I just kind of walked away because I went, how can you have the audacity to call yourself a screenwriter when you've never written a screenplay?
Right.
And let alone, how do you have the audacity to call yourself a screenwriter if you haven't written more than 5 screenplays? And the more you like Film Courage on YouTube, I've listened to almost every single one about writing.
Yeah.
And they're always like, I wrote 5 screenplays, and of those 5 screenplays, none of them could get shown. None of them get made, but it helped me with my 6th screenplay. And when I got that one, I was closer to getting this one made because this one was decent and it won 2nd place in this film contest, but that one never got made. But my 8th screenplay, that's the one that finally got looked at and got me so that I could make my 9th one. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
What do you? And he's like, all I'm trying to say is I kept learning how to write. I got better and better. And this screenplay, because it was better, got me to this level. This screenplay, because it was better, got me to this level. And finally, my 9th screenplay got to be made. And that's like a good story compared to some people who make 20 screenplays. Their 25th one finally gets picked up and they never sell any of their previous work. It was just all homework in their film school, basically their screenwriting film school, to get them to where they are now. And that's kind of how I see it, is like, I have a plethora of screenplays. I have tons, an erroneous amount, erroneous. And
are you a fast screenwriter, or do you have to take your time to develop the story?
Depends what it is.
Okay.
It really depends what it is. Like, the one that I'm working on right now, it's called Displaced. I had the idea for years, had the idea at the same time I had the idea for Day Labor. Same time. I didn't write Day Labor until 2020, though I had the idea in 2017, but I've been kind of thinking about it. I've been jotting notes down and really contemplating what the characters could go and who they're going to be. And I want to be really culture appropriate, not, make sure I don't mess anything up.
Right.
And now it's 2024 and I pitched this idea again without having a full screenplay. And of course, of the 3 ideas I pitched, 2 of them having screenplays, which one did they like? Well, they like the 3rd one, the one about the homeless vet, and I don't have a screenplay for it. So I sat down, and in 2 weeks I finished the full screenplay, because there was that goal, right? There was that carrot at the end of the thing. There was that treasure there. It's like, this person likes the idea. Whether it gets made or not, I've always wanted to write it. I already have the concept down. I've already written 25 pages. It's finally time for me to finish this idea and concept. And it took me 2 weeks and finished it. Day Labor took me 3 days. Another film I did, Marks, it took me 3 days because I was so ingrained and I had the time. It was during COVID. So all my jobs are shut down because I'm a bartender server. So I'm sitting at home and an idea came to me. I just started clicking away and I got it done in 3 days.
Have you ever gotten to a point writing an idea where you're like, it's not that good, I'm just going to stop? Or do you still hold on to it? Like, it's not good right now, I'm going to stop and I'm going to come back to it later. Like, what's your process like when it comes to writing out ideas that you thought were good, maybe beginning halfway through the screenwriting, you realize that it's not as good as you anticipated?
Yeah, I have had that many times. I mean, I would say that Displaced used to be called The City Center or The Center, and then it used to be called something else. And then the one about the homeless vet. And I wrote it to a point. I didn't know if that was the right way to go. I stopped, whether it's writer's block, whatever it is. I had producers come in and say, oh, we should take it this route, do this and this, and have it be this. And I went, okay. So I started going that route and I just couldn't finish it. I got to page 20 and I went, this isn't the original idea. I don't want just to make a Fight Club with this, that. I don't want to make just any type of film. I want it to have purpose to it. And then I stopped again. And that was in 2022 or, I think, 2022. And then when he liked it, Kevin, it was just like, I like this idea. I like where you're going. And I went, cool. A guy who likes my original concept, what I originally wanted to do, and it lit the fire underneath me to be like, I have to finish it now. And I got to finish it with the original concept I had in mind and not this diluted one, not this arbitrary one that doesn't make any sense. Let me go with the one that I knew from the beginning made sense. But yeah, there's been screenplays I've written, like Sharkadile, which was about which it was based in New York, and it was based around the crocodiles in the sewer that got mixed with genetics of a shark. And it was right around the Sharknado time. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to write that for sci-fi. And I got halfway in, Rob, and I'm like, this sucks. This is a terrible screenplay, but I'm going to finish it because I just want to have fun writing. So sure. Yeah, I finished it. It was fun writing, but yeah, there's different ideas that come to your head, and you're just like,
oh, that's hilarious.
Like I wrote a Yeti piece that I still want to make to this day called Frostbite, about a punk rock kid, this yada yada. They're doing home renovations out in the middle of a blizzard. The blizzard hits, and then there happens to be this Yeti underneath the ground, and he comes through and starts eating people, yada yada. Super fun concept and idea. Loved writing it. Do I ever think it'll get made? Probably not, Rob, but it was fun to write. And so sometimes you just write scripts for yourself and you're just like, this was fun. It helps you hone your ability. It helps you get better as a writer. And at the end of the day, if by the grace of God, if someone comes along going, I want a Yeti film, or I want a film about sharks and crocodiles, do you think you got something? I'll be like, actually, I do. That's weirdly specific to what I actually have. Yes, I have Sharkadile. Here you go.
Have you written something that you knew whether or not you thought it was a good idea, as far as like, not, I guess what I'm referring to, like a good idea as far as like what you wrote, maybe at that point you thought, okay, it's good idea, good story, but the script's not up to par yet, but there's something really good that I know for a fact this has to be made. I'm going to work very hard to make sure this get made. If it takes 10 years from now, but I really want this one to be made because I believe in this so much that I'm going to make this one a priority. And even if it's not the main priority, but it's a priority. Do you ever have a script that you look at and you just like, this has to be made no matter what? Do you have that for yourself? Or is it more kind of like, if they like this idea, or if they need an idea, I can just present X, Y, and Z?
Honestly, Frankie's such a good writer, my buddy, and I keep putting him out there, but he has two concepts called, it's Ludomania and El Mudo, and we've been working on those forever, and they've just been sitting off to the side. It's like I can't let it go. I always try to pitch them, and I'm just like, I really want to make it. But yeah, even the faith-based horror film I'm doing now, in 2020, I made a film called Within with my buddy Frankie. He directed it. I used the money that Trump gave us so graciously during COVID. And my wife probably wished that I would have invested that in a brand new car for us and not into a film that has not seen the light of day yet. But, that is actually the script that this current faith-based addiction one is based on. And I completely changed it to fit locations. And now I'm rewriting the entire thing. And I've had the idea since 2015 and I just can't let it go. I want to do it so bad. I know there's purpose to it. I know that once people see it, it will change people's lives, perceptions. I'm super excited about that idea. I can't wait for it to be seen. But then there's films like The Bite of Winter, a Western that I wrote, where I'm never going to let it go. It has to be made. It's all about the gunfight. It's what every Western person wants to watch. It has a good story. It has this morality issue, but The Bite of Winter is like 12 people come down on this cabin in the woods during this blizzard in 1890. And they're trying to get back this brick of gold that was stolen from basically from the bank in town. And it just ends up being this huge gunfight. And I'm like, that's exactly what Western people want to watch. So that's what we all want to watch, just a huge gunfight. So let me just do it. Let me have a big old shootout. That's like the entire film. And let me at least put some story elements in it so that people care about these characters and I care. But let's just have a shootout. So yeah, I mean, like you're learning already, I got quite a bit of screenplays that I want to get out there. But there's a lot of them I'm just super passionate about. I know they can be a good film. I know if done the right way, it will just, as long as the vision's there and whoever directs it, whether it's myself and God blesses me to do that, or whether it's a friend of mine or someone I don't know, if they get it on screen and people get to watch it, I hope that it's just a semblance of what I imagined writing it. And so, yeah, there's tons of stuff. I mean, there's Primer, which has been in a constant, if excuse my language, but a constant hell of a production battle just from back in 2017. Still hasn't been made. Don't know if it'll ever be made. Amy Johnson actually was in a short for Primer as a proof of concept. I wrote a script for Amy Johnson, who's an amazing stunt woman, but also just an amazing actress. She's so awesome, dude. I would not want to run into her in a dark alley. Well, actually, I would. She's super nice, but if I didn't know her and she was just getting ready to kick me in the face, I would not want to run into her in a dark alley. But I wrote a script for her called Love and War, which is a romantic comedy, but it's an action. So like it's an action rom-com. Super fun, super awesome. It's a bunch of fighting. Two assassins find love on a dating site meant for assassins. Not for assassins, but they end up on this dating site and they end up connecting with each other, not knowing that they're both assassins. So excuse me on that. So basically, like they're both swiping left, swiping right. They land on each other. They're perfect. They're a match. And then they find out that this group of people is coming after them and they don't know which one it is for. Like, who are they coming after?
Interesting.
So it's super fun. It's kind of like Accident Man on Vacation, the second one with Scott Adkins, where it's
Hitman's Holiday.
Hitman's Holiday, where it's based in Cancun, right? So they go on vacation to get away from everything, and then all these hit people come to this resort trying to basically knock them off as the price increases on their head.
And she loves the idea, I take it, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, she loves the idea. We wrote it for her and Scott Adkins to kind of get some of that first Accident Man, that chemistry that they had together.
Yes,
where Amy Johnson should have won. There's no way that Jane the Ripper was getting taken down like that. Okay, Scott Adkins, he met his match.
It was a good fight scene. I remember. Yeah, I do agree with you on that. And yeah, I actually could have seen her win that fight too. Now that I think about it, but yeah, that's actually a really interesting idea. Scott Adkins and Amy Johnson as a hookup through an app, and then they're having their heads being hunted for. That's a wonderful concept. And Scott Adkins and Amy Johnson could hit it off really well.
Oh yeah, just the chemistry alone together. Yeah. Really interesting. But then the humor's in there as long, like Scott Adkins' character was going to be a baker, and
that's hilarious.
So naturally, the comedy was writing itself.
Oh my god, it's so funny.
But we're going to get it made, Rob. Amy and I will get that made. We're going to get it made.
I love that idea. Scott Adkins, a baker who's an assassin.
That's right.
I love that concept so much. That's hilarious. I have been very fortunate with Gary who's recommended me a number of people. Luke, who else? I had interviewed a friend of his as well too, Anna Maria, excuse me, which I have not posted the episodes yet, but it was a great conversation that I do intend on uploading really soon. But him having recommended you, it was one of those things where I got to the point with certain people, when they recommend to speak with somebody, I will take them on their word because I trust them and I trust that there's a good reason behind it. And I don't even think I've ever questioned Gary. Like, why woman? I was just, okay, I'll do it. And then we just went ahead from there. And basically the conversations I've had with each of the people he's recommended so far have been nothing but fantastic. So I really was anticipating this as well too. In the fact that I mentioned earlier that I could not find anything on you. And considering that this is basically your first interview, I'm honored that you've given me that opportunity to have that with you. So I want to thank you for that as well. But I also want to thank you because there was a lot that I had learned from my conversation with Devaney, different angles when it comes to someone's faith and the various other things that have gone through in their careers and how things are going for them so far. That coming from our conversation between her and I really kind of helped me figure out how I wanted to approach this conversation with you, particularly with your faith, because I understand the notion of, you don't want to talk about faith in politics, but I always figure, well, why? Because I think you can learn a lot from a person, especially if that's something they really truly believe in, they really have a strong stance on that. I think you can learn a lot from that as well too, where I don't want to have that preconceived notion of, well, they're faith-based and this and that. I don't want to have that nonsense going through my head. So I'm hoping that, with me talking with you, that when Day Labor comes out, whoever is watching the movie, that if they listen to this conversation or watch this conversation, that anyone can write the story, no matter who you are, is basically what it boils down to. And that to me is much more interesting than, I hope it doesn't come up the wrong way, but then talking about the product in itself. So I've learned a lot about you. I think the ideas that you've come up with, that you've shared with me so far, are phenomenal. And I really do hope that Scott Adkins and Amy Johnson film comes to fruition. I really, really do. Just as soon as you shared the idea, but as soon as you said Scott Adkins is a baker, I was like, I love the idea. I love it so much. And if God were to say no, I'll be like, you got to reconsider that story, man, because that's a really good idea. I think you have you're missing out a great opportunity. And I think he's really cognizant about what works and what doesn't work. But if you tell him, think of Accident Man, but with hookups, with an actual hookup love story, the sky's the limit there. So the fact that you have that idea that's coming to your head, I'm really quite impressed, to be honest with you. And I just can't wait to see what else you have coming down the pipeline here. And I'm hoping that Day Labor does have great success, but I also hope people respond to it as well too, and that it grants you more opportunities as far as your career is concerned, to the point where your name will be recognized for not just being a good screener, but being a great storyteller on top of that as well too. So this is me essentially giving your flowers for everything that I'm hoping that will come to fruition, and the success that will come with it. Not for fame and glory, because I don't care about that, but really for opportunities for you as a screenwriter, as an artist at the end of the day. So that's what I'm hoping and wishing for you as well. But I don't know if there's anything you want to say in closing for yourself that people can look out for, that apart from what you happen to share here, or anything else you can share with people to be on the lookout for coming down the pipeline for yourself.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you to you as well. Like I said, it's the first time being interviewed for anything, and kind of getting some things out there, having a platform to finally kind of be able to speak. And I'm not looking for fame and glory. I just want to be creative. Right. I appreciate everything you've done. I've looked right before I did this. I was going over the other interviews that you did, whether it was with Louis or Jesse or Kaufman or right. With Albright or Gary. I did watch the Debney Pin with Nightmare Christie. Whatever it is that you've done, I tried watching at least like 10 interviews to kind of get where you're coming from. And I just got to say, I just appreciate you having me here. When it comes to the future, honestly, I just want my inner circle and the people that I've been working with, I want all of us to reach a new height. I want all of us to be able to go forward and be successful. And everybody's version of success is different. Mm-hmm. So I would really love to end this by saying thank you. All glory goes to God. And I just want to thank Frankie, Gary, just these people who are in my life who've really kept me strong. Thank my wife, my dad, my mother, my brother, my little sister, Claire. She's just so amazing. She's 20 years younger than I am, but I want to give her a shout out just so when she sees this, she can get all excited and smile. And I'm just excited. I'm just excited to see where everything goes.
Well, I'm excited to see where everything goes for you as well, too. And I do have a lot of high hopes for you as well. So, again, this is me giving you flowers. But again, thank you so much for giving me time. I really mean that from the bottom of my heart. This was a lot of fun. I was anticipating a great conversation, and I got an even better one to put in perspective here. So thank you for that as well, too. So for the cameras, I'm going to say bye to you. And thank you so much for everything you've given me here. And until next time, cheers to you.